This is lecture number 9 in nu210 Nursing Concepts. What we're going to be looking at this time is nursing informatics and HIPAA. Of course, this was composed by Dr. David Sharp, so we give him full credit for this lecture. And you're going to be receiving some health information packs from the Division of Nursing that you need to fill out. You need to put some data in there. You need to submit those packs by the deadline. And what we want you to think about is, how do you believe that that information is recorded and transmitted? Do you think it's just done all on paper, put in files, or is it computerized, digitalized, and put on CDs or stored on a hard drive in a computer? So if we were to store that information on the hard drive of a computer, we could consider that act part of being that classification called nursing informatics. So the thing about informatics is, it's here, it's something you have to learn. You have to participate in it. You have to document correctly in computer systems, health records. All of these types of data have to be stored correctly, and you have a responsibility to be trained to know how to deal with the informatics you are exposed to. And you need to know how it's going to continue to grow in the future. This kind of makes it a specialty area that we consider highly sought after. Or in other words, you will be in great demand if you are an expert at this type of information gathering. The thing about informatics is it is very revolutionary, and it affects every aspect of healthcare, from admission to discharge, and how we deal with our patients. It is all recorded, usually in a computer database on a server, and it's a worldwide phenomenon. This information can be made available to anyone over the World Wide Web or the Internet. You see the next slide, we see a nursing informatics model. You see nursing in the center box. And it talks about education, practice, and research and administration. We see on the left that the healthcare system interacts with that dynamically. And then we have computer and information science that also is a part of that in a dynamic process. The data is processed, becomes information. It's transformed into knowledge. So information becomes knowledge, and of course you know that knowledge is power. Looking at advanced communications technology, we see there's an increased availability worldwide. It's readily available. It's not something that is not available to even folks that are of a low income status. Many times there are programs that make computers and iPads and things like that, smartphones, available to these folks that are even of that low economic status. Looking at a bigger global picture, it promotes ties between people and nations, so that you can connect and be communicating with someone in the United Kingdom or Russia or Germany or France. We have many friends that we communicate with that are in Finland and other countries like that, that are nurses that are of the same profession in us, and we share information, and we even do assignments and share assignments in the education process with them. It also bridges the gap between rural communities and major metropolitan areas. And most of the time, meeting the needs, the healthcare needs of those that are in rural areas, it's folks that are in the metropolitan areas that take that up, usually get grants, open clinics, etc. And so that information technology is available to them readily. Now, the nursing profession needs to be actively involved in developing clinical information systems. This is why nursing informaticists are very important to developing medical records, how we document, what kind of software is good, beta testing of software, evaluating software, and saying, well, this is a fantastic system, or this is not one, let's change this about it and make it good. We also need to develop electronic health records. This is important to have an accurate way to store the health records of our clients, in a secure way, in a way that is easily accessed also. We establish care standards by being active in this informatic age. We also safeguard client privacy. Of course, we make very, very advantageous use of the internet, and we research better ways to improve access and quality of care through technology. This topic can even be topics that are addressed in dissertations, doctoral dissertations, master's dissertations. Research projects can take place through this. In Catalano chapter 19, we read that the nursing profession is transformed, enhanced, and enriched as nurses become active participants in the information revolution. I think that the information revolution has already taken place. We're in probably the apex of it, the climax of it, the um, the high point of that revolution. What we're experiencing nowadays is innovations, and of course, you know the difference between invention and innovation. So many nurses and researchers are coming up with very innovative ways to utilize information technology in the healthcare system. Now, what would you think the eighth leading cause of death is in the U.S.? Well, it's medical errors, and we're going to see how that ties into the subject today. 44 to 100,000 deaths occur annually because of medical errors. We have the types of errors that are listed as the medications that are most common. Then wound infections can be fatal. Then technical complications in the third place. We have an increased use of informatics, and that will reduce errors, we believe, and drive down cost of healthcare. We believe that it is superior to paper charting, it is superior to paper records, and it will contribute to that decrease in errors and high cost of healthcare. But regardless of that, would you believe that only about 8% of United States hospitals have computerized medical records and charting? So we've got a lot of catching up to do with our hospitalized institutions, etc., in utilizing information systems to keep complete, accurate, easily accessible records. Now, as nursing informatics has developed, we see that it combines computer science, which we see as an institution-wide operation. In other words, that's the hardware, that's the servers, that's the drives, that's the PCs. And we have information science, which is the software part of that. That's the programs that are in the hard drives and in the servers. So nursing science is the research data from nursing, and that helps nurses plan and deliver care. So this nursing science gets the full use of information and computer science put together to help us to determine what is good care and how to give that care in the best way possible. So we have this information stored on hard drives and servers in many, many different places. Looking at what we call the linear model of informatics, data to information to knowledge along a continuum. Now that data is just facts. These are raw and unstructured. It can just be a number. But the thing about it is you've got to interpret that some way. So information takes the data given form and interpretation. In other words, when you add degrees Fahrenheit to the number 102, you come up with 102 degrees Fahrenheit. So that's something we can work with in the medical field and in the nursing field. In all of our interdisciplinary practices, we see that that number 102 can indicate where that client's thermoregulation is. So it's a little bit high, so we know that they've got a fever. So we interpret that into knowledge, and that tells us that that becomes a synthesis of the data information. So we know it's an abnormal temperature. They have a fever. Now the nurse or the physician can decide what are we going to do for that. Many times the nurses will have a PRN order to deal with that type of a temperature. So there can be standing orders that say, well, give Tylenol 500 milligrams if temperature is above 100 degrees Fahrenheit. So in this instance, gathering that data of 102 degrees Fahrenheit lets us know that we can administer a medication to deal with that problem. So knowledge creates new questions and areas for research also, not just in dealing with the practical way of how we apply this. Now the decision-making process for nurses. There's a huge expansion in nursing research and knowledge. There's over 700,000 references added to Medline each year. Medline is a big database. Yet nurses decide on a course of action by what? Referring back to knowledge learned in school. That's what you're learning right now. And sometimes just asking someone that they work with, one of their colleagues. Sometimes you can look up the problem in any textbook or reference book available in the work setting, and there are many, many of these things available in many of the institutions that we work in. They have intranet, which have internal sources on their server. They have the internet, in which you can go out into the World Wide Web and look up references for a certain problem. And then, of course, we use our previous experiences, or what we call our gut instincts, in our decision-making process. Now, what is EBP, or evidence-based practice, and should we be using it? And many institutions have arrived at the conclusion that yes, they need to base their practice on evidence. In other words, that's the body of knowledge that we draw from, because many people participate in research projects and publish that information. So we access the current literature containing the latest diagnostic techniques and treatment modalities. That's using evidence-based practice. Or we confer with a knowledgeable colleague who uses that, and they share that information with us. They may know what the evidence-based practice is that pertains and relates to the care that we're wanting to give our clients at this particular time. So they share that information with us, and it becomes part of our practice. And we need to evaluate the effectiveness of previous experiences. So you got to know how to critically think, and you critically evaluate all of the sources of knowledge that come your way. You don't just take it at face value. You research it and make sure that it is accurate and effective. Now here's something that we all deal with. It's a very, very common thing: cell phones. Now, should we use cell phones in clinical areas? Think about that for a few minutes and pause the audio. Write down your thoughts, and you can share it with us on the discussion board if you wish, or you can just bring that information to us the next semester and we'll get involved in a group discussion about it. But cell phones, should you be able to use your cell phone as a source of information technology in the clinical areas? Now, while you're thinking about that, consider, does it violate any kind of privacy? Does it make the institution look bad? Does it make you look bad? Should you be on a cell phone in certain places of a hospital and not in other places? Think about all that and just jot your thoughts down. Now let's get back to our lecture and we look at the systems that are used in healthcare facilities. Definitely it's becoming more complex, and it's inclusive of all aspects of client care, from admission to discharge and everything in between. We are using these information systems. They may not be user-friendly sometimes, but we try to make it relatively simple, but the problem is that data can be very complicated. So how do you make it easy to use when you're dealing with complicated data? Well, that's the challenge, and that's exactly what nurse informatics addresses. You may underuse those systems, or folks may not understand how to use them. We have to train them, and we have to orient them to these systems. The local systems many times are based on very large systems that are available countrywide. So from one hospital to hospital, you may see there's a version of Meditech used here, and the other version in another hospital is a little bit different, but pretty much the same. So it's kind of easy to go back and forth. But everyone needs to be trained, and they need to receive proper orientation in how to use a nursing informatics in that hospital institution or whatever institution you're in. Now, sometimes there can be errors in that, and they can lead to medical errors. Well, is the error with the system itself, or is it with the folks that are putting in? Is it lack of training, or are we seeing bugs in the system? We've got to determine those things. Now, sometimes we use them in stressful situations, but nurses are not consulted in the design. So, someone other than the nursing profession may design the nursing documentation. Now, that can be problematic sometimes because it's not nurses that are composing this. You may run into glitches in the system. You may run into problems. You may run into contradictions. Now, we've always had paper records around. And are they good or are they bad? We look at Catalan chapter 19, and we see the advantages to paper records are that people know how to use it. Most folks, any nurses from age 20 to 80 are going to know how to paper chart. It's fast for current practice, so you can sit down and jot a note quickly. You don't have to go to a computer, log in, pull up the system that you're going to be charting in, and then enter the data. It's pretty much unbreakable unless a fire breaks out right that minute, or you drop it in a puddle of water and it's destroyed. And it accepts multiple media types, so you can put graphs on paper, photographs, drawings, and text. And the legal issues and costs are very much understood because we've been dealing with this for the past couple of centuries. But the disadvantages to paper records can be lost. It's human error, usually. Well, we put it over there, usually, but we had to move it because we were cleaning or rearranging, and then somebody forgot we put it over there. Got put in this file, totally lost. It's often illegible and incomplete. So if you don't require, say, you must print, and you must print legibly, and the best that people can print sometimes is not easy enough for other folks to read. And sometimes it can be incomplete because it depends on the sentences that you form in your mind individually as to what you write down. You can't get remote access to paper records. So if those paper records are located downtown and you live in the suburbs, you have to drive to downtown area, access those records, and maybe bring them back and forth. It can only be accessed by one person at a time, unless you have multiple copies of the same paper records, but that can be very, very problematic. Sometimes it's disorganized. Sometimes the information is duplicated. Sometimes it's hard to store it because it becomes bulky and it becomes that those boxes that are full of stuff over the past 100 years that you have to rent storage rooms almost as big as the institution themselves to keep those records. It's difficult to research, and continuous quality improvement is laborious in paper records. The same client may have separate records at each facility, so the physician's office has a different record, the hospital, home health care has a different record, and the records are shared only through hard copy. That is the disadvantages to paper records. How about some advantages for EHR, or electronic health records? I'm sure that you can think of those yourself, but we'll look at this slide and see what they are. They can be accessed by multiple care providers from remote sites. They can provide reminders about completing information or carrying out protocols. They can warn of incompatibilities of medications or variants from normal standards. The information captured once from a client and transmitted to every record. So you get it one time and it goes automatically into everything that is linked to that client's medical record number. It requires little storage or space. This is our micro technology that has provided this for us. You can get an iPad with gigabytes of storage space that just is phenomenal. It's hard to lose those records. Many times, even if your computer crashes, someone can retrieve them off the hard drive, even if it was deleted. It's easy to research. It's not located in one place. It can be stored in a cloud. It can be stored on a server in an institution's main office. The record can be retrieved from multiple locations. So if the main office is in San Antonio, Texas, you can retrieve it in Boise, Idaho, or Texarkana, Texas. The major advantages are there's a completeness of documentation there and a reduction in error. And that's basically what we're shooting for. Now, what's the downside? There's always a downside to something. There's a high cost involved in purchasing and converting from paper system. It's going to take human beings many, many hours to transfer the data from paper into computerized systems. They're going to have to scan the papers, put them in files, classify them, organize them, and put passwords and make them available in different places on the software system for the institution's intranet. This makes it a steep learning curve for employees. These employees have got to be smart. They've got to be trained in it. It is portable. But it's subject to glitches of electronic systems. So bugs, viruses, we've always got to be protected. Maybe someone entered the data wrong with the wrong computer code and it messes up the whole system. We have to decide who can enter the data in the system and when entries should be made. So some files need to be locked. Some files need to be like a wiki where that you can change information. Sometimes HIPAA arrangements need to be sorted out. That's the Privacy Act that we're going to be looking at in just a few minutes. There's no set location for entering information, so it's got to be specified. Do you want to do it at the bedside, or do you want to have points of care throughout the hospital floor where you can sit and chart in the computer or access information from the computer? Do you want to document at the time of care? But the problem is sometimes it doesn't happen until the end of the shift. People can go into overtime and it can be very time consuming in their behalf. Well, now when we're looking at the meaningful use of EHRs, or electronic health records, under the HITECH Act of 2009, what is a meaningful use? Well, the main components of meaningful use are, and you can read along with me, the use of a certified EHR in a meaningful manner, such as e-prescribing. That is just one aspect, writing prescriptions with an electronic computer. The use of certified EHR technology for electronic exchange of health information to improve quality of health care. Sounds good, doesn't it? Very complex way of saying let's use information technology to help us be well. The use of certified EHR technology to submit clinical, quality, and other measures. So we're measuring performance in our institutions, making sure we're giving good care, at least the minimal standard of care, and we're using electronic records to document that. So in other words, providers need to show they're using certified EHR technology in ways that can be measured significantly in quality and in quantity. The meaningful use of EHRs intended by the U.S. government incentive is categorized as such as follows. Improve care coordination, makes sense. Reduce healthcare disparities, yes, we love that. Engage patients and their families, we love that in healthcare. Improve population and public health, ensure adequate privacy and security. So all of those things just seem to make sense, don't they? So it seems that we should use EHRs in our institutions. Now, how does HIPAA apply to this? HIPAA in 1996 was passed, and it was called the Health Insurance Portable and Accountability Act, and we use the acronym HIPAA. These came up with policies covering collection, development, and use of client data, and they're used to ensure health insurance portability, so you can have your record in Los Angeles, California, transferred to the hospital that's taking care of you while you're on vacation in Chicago, Illinois, or in New York City, or in Des Moines, Iowa, wherever you happen to need health care, and they can access those records. It's portable. You have to sign an agreement that gives them permission to access those records as a healthcare institution, and that they will not share them with anybody else, and it will only be used in giving care for you at that time. It reduces healthcare fraud and abuse. It guarantees security and privacy of health information and enforces standards of health information. Here we have a slide that shows you the titles of HIPAA and how it ends up down in security at the bottom right. I'll give you a few minutes to look at those. Just go ahead and pause the audio, look at that, and then turn the audio back on. And what does HIPAA mean to you as a student nurse? Well, as a nurse, you need to make sure that you report these common HIPAA HITECH Act issues, and I'll let you read those. But if you find any unsecured information, you need to report it to your instructor or your supervisor. Did you lose or misplace some information? You need to report that. Did you accidentally release it to somebody who did not have permission to receive it? Did you accidentally receive patient information that was not meant for you? Do you have a laptop, PDA, or flash drive that has information on it for the client stolen from you? So, looking at faxes, was it meant for you? Did you send it to the wrong number? Do you have to talk to the information security officer at the institution when you see these things happening? And also, I'd like to say personally, make sure that you're not talking about confidential client information in areas other than private secured areas on the floor. Don't go in the elevator talking about your patients. Don't go in the cafeteria talking about your patients. Especially don't mention names in public areas of your patients. They may not want other folks to know that they're in the hospital. So just use common sense. Treat them the way you'd want to be treated. Their information is private. You want your own information to be private. You only want it shared with who you say can have access to that information. That concludes this lecture.